Hey folks, it's John from A is for Alcoholic, here with another AIFA conversation. Today I got to sit down with Dayna Keyes. She is an on-air personality for one of the biggest radio stations in California and possibly the country. She's also the host of the Radio Rehab podcast, which is one of my favorites. She was kind enough to talk to me about her drug addiction, her alcoholism, her relapses, her rehabs, and her ultimate recovery. So please, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dayna Keyes.
Yeah, it was like frozen for a second. I thought you were like in deep thought, and I'm like, no, he's frozen.
No.
Totally frozen.
But yeah, I just wanted, I also wanted to get women's voices. And I know that's something that we talked about via text, that it seems to be in recovery. Men are a dime a dozen who want to talk about it. And
They all want to talk about it. All the men want to talk about it, and they're fine talking about it. And the women are like, oh, well, let me think about it and let me pray about it, and it's just like, I just kind of feel like it's better to just put everything out there on the table, and that way more people get helped.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me your sobriety date this time around.
September 17th, 2015.
Okay.
So on St. Patrick's Day, I had exactly 3.5 years.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. We had a fun, sober St. Patrick's Day up in Portland, and we went to go see a rock show that got canceled because of weather.
Nice.
And and it ended up being an awesome trip, and I got to see my best friend, and we got to hang out anyway, and I'm so glad that we went regardless. And so yeah, it's always interesting. Do you frequent bars at all? I mean, are there any reasons? I know you work with musicians and you work in radio and
like I go to concerts a lot,
Sure.
I end up going to clubs. I had friends in town that I went to high school with recently, and they wanted to go to get some wine. So we went to a wine bar. So I'm in those situations a lot, but I don't really notice it affecting me. What's funny is it'll affect me randomly. I'll be watching Ray Donovan and watching how much scotch he drinks. And I'm like, God, I want some. That's not fair. Or I'll just drive by a poster and I'll get a random craving. But people are always, every time they drink in front of me, they're like, does this bother you? And I'm like, no, it hadn't even occurred to me that it should. Yeah.
So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about growing up in your childhood and how, if and what might have led to you drinking and using early on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think there was anything about my childhood that led to me drinking and using. I think it was just the fact that I'm an addict and an alcoholic. And the minute I introduced that stuff into my system, my body was like, yeah, more, but yeah, my dad was an AA. So I knew him being, loaded until I was 10 and a half years old, but it never really affected me. He wasn't abusive.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, he never hurt me. I never noticed anything except he was like a big kid and we were best friends. And then when I was 10 and a half, he got sober for real. He tried a bunch of times before then, but when I was 10 and a half, he got sober for real. And I was around AA a lot as a kid. And, I was okay with being around the grown-ups in AA, but I had to go to Alatot one time because I was acting up. And it was such a punishment because I hated being around other kids. And I'm like, no, I'll be quiet. Just let me go to the big people one,
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and I didn't really pick up or start using until I was, not that it's so late, but I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And it was drugs. Drugs were my thing before alcohol. And the minute I did it, I started doing it every day in high school. And then my parents threw me in rehab between my junior and senior year because I had no choice when you're that young. It's like you can either go here or go to juvenile hall.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'll go to the rehab. It was a cushy LA place anyway. Ended up being fun. I didn't pay attention to anything. I just made friends with other people my age that were also like hoodlums and vandals and whatever we were. And we just laughed.
Mm-hmm.
laughed it off. And then when I got out, I just like the drug that I had done at that point was speed, and it just wasn't once I got away from it, I never wanted to see it again. So it was fine for me to, I was able to stay abstinent from that. And alcohol wasn't something I had tried at that point because it just seemed like something that made you like lose control and throw up and act stupid. So it wasn't until I ended up, it was one night, like, and then I did start drinking when I was about like 18 or 19. And then the marching powder got introduced. And then you're up way too up too late, like, drinking with the cocaine. And then somebody introduced heroin, but it wasn't injectable. It was powder. So it wasn't scary to me as it should have been. It wasn't. It was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And the minute
you're doing lines of coke anyway, so why not do some heroin?
What's the difference? Yeah, what's the difference? So, and then the minute I did it, I was hooked.
And that was what, 93, 94, something like that?
I'm really bad with years, but I know I was like 19.
Okay. So you're drinking and you're using, so heroin becomes your thing. You consider yourself AA, NA, all of the above? A?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I go to AA because that's where I found recovery. Like, yes, I am a heroin addict, but I don't relate to or want to relate to people who insist on letting you know that they're addicts, because I feel like, it's like, every time I've gone to an AA meeting, I say I'm an alcoholic. If I go to an NA meeting, I say I'm an addict. I just don't feel the need that everybody needs to know I'm a junkie. And I feel like people who act like that and they hang on to that, they're going to go back to that, and I feel like the recovery I found in AA is what really has kept me sober. Like, I got 3 years clean in NA when I was in my 20s. And I know there's that part in the program where it says alcohol is a drug. Well, I just thought that didn't apply to me. So, I stayed off everything, but then like, I kind of felt like I graduated from the program. I was just done with it. I wasn't getting anything out of it. I wasn't paying attention. I got into a relationship with a normie, and I had really separated, and I copped a lot of resentments, and I'd really separated myself from the program. And then my dad died, and I was without anything. I was without a program. I was without, friends who you can really count on. And that's when I went, oh, okay, I'm going to drink because that's okay, because it's legal. All the justifications,
So you're 3 years sober from heroin.
It froze again, didn't it?
It's possible.
There it is. Okay.
So you're sober from heroin. Your father passes away, and you say drinking's an acceptable form of relief from this, or coping.
Yeah, and it was like more kind of anger. Like the night that he passed away, we all went out to dinner, and my dad died sober, by the way. And we all went out to dinner, and everybody was toasting to his life with alcohol. And I was just like, fuck this. And I had the guy who was my boyfriend at the time, like, you go get me a double martini and put it by the bathroom now. And, and he was like, well, you were just a heroin addict, so it's okay if you drink, right? And of course I was like, yeah, totally. Cause we got to train them. Otherwise they're not going to let us do it.
Right.
So I trained him pretty good on that until he was like, until years later when he was like, oh my God, you're a mess. But yeah, that's where it started, where it was like, yeah. And I also had this kind of like, how dare you people expect me to not do anything? Because my world was shattered. It was just upside down.
And can we just touch on who your father was? Because it seems to me like that's a tremendous thing to get sober and to stay sober and to pass sober, coming from such a life of excess.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean... Yeah, being in the Doobie Brothers in the 70s.
Yeah,
so
your dad was Keith Knutson, the drummer for the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay, and I mean that to me is so amazing, because there's a lot of people who don't make it out of that lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we hear about it constantly. I'm sure you do too. You're in the music business all the time, and it's amazing to me. And so I just really appreciate those when I see those people who could have very easily not made it to
Oh
do
yeah.
this with
I mean,
it's
he tried a bunch of, rehabs, but it was AA that really did it for him too.
Mhm. And so you have that double martini by the bathroom?
I had the double martini by the bathroom, slammed it, and then up at my parents' house, because they lived in wine country, everybody was bringing wine, so that was around. So I'd be drinking that. Um, and then when I went back and my boyfriend and I left, we went back to my house. That's when I was like, I'm going to be drinking now. So,
Mhm.
and it was like probably maybe it was even a couple years that I was able to. I'm not going to say I was able to control it because I did it every day. But like when I say control, I mean I didn't wake up and drink, because that's how I want to be. That's how I was in the end. That's who I am as a person. I would get up and drink, like
Yeah.
um let's see, did it do the thing again? There it is. It's
Okay.
back. Okay.
Um so yeah, I know I understand completely because near the end, there are always those sort of rules and justifications and what time and what occasions you can drink, and then near the very end, it was first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And all day. And then,
Hmm.
I was working in radio. I A lot of crazy stuff happened. Like I got a stalker who thought I was speaking to him through music. That was really scary. Um, he thought he would call the station like 24 hours a day, talk to the board ops even, and tell them to tell me that he got my message. And it's like, I mean, yeah, I didn't even pick the songs I played during my show at that station, let
Hmm.
alone, let alone like program 24 hours a day. Like, um, but yeah, he thought I was like some kind of an angel, which is scary. He was like a 60 something year old retired police officer. It was really scary. And it went
Was
on
there,
for a couple of years.
yeah, so he just heard you on the radio and this is what he thought of you.
Well, so he called in.
Hmm.
And it's funny that you should ask that question. He called in and I was frustrated because I'm running commercials, I'm running the board, I'm on air, and I'm very busy. And he asked a question about a song that was played like 5 hours ago when I wasn't on. And was a little snappy, and he sounded hurt. And I felt bad. And also, I could tell he's a little drunk. And I'm like, this is just an old alcoholic. And I just fucking
Hmm.
hurt his feelings. I'm an asshole. I'm like, look, dude, just call back in an hour and I'll figure it out. So he did. And that was the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life. I should have let it go, but I didn't. So I figured out the song. And from then on, I literally became his angel. And he would call all the time. And even though I wouldn't be on the phone with him, he would be thinking every song I played was me trying to tell him something. And
Hmm.
it was scary. It was really scary. And my work, wanted me to fill out a restraining order, which would have meant I had to tell them where I lived. So I didn't want to do that. And the way it ended, I had to fill out a restraining order. He violated it and he went to jail. And I knew things were going to go downhill quickly from there because he was a cop and he saw himself as a protector. So they sent him to jail. And after he got out, he was awaiting trial and killed himself. He blew his head off. And I think I felt responsible for that. Like everybody around me, everybody at my work, even all the cops that were helping me were like, it's done, it's over. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a sad, tragic thing that I have to deal with now. So I really took that on as like, I did there, it kind of just, if it weren't for me, this wouldn't have happened.
Hmm. And this was shortly after you said your father passed in 2005. So you're in San Francisco doing radio all these years. This happens to you, and at what point so you were drinking all of that time
Uh-huh.
from like 5 until just a few years ago.
Oh, 2005.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm like 5 what? PM?
No,
No.
2005.
Oh,
No.
no, no. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I was drinking and I was able to go out and function. And it wasn't until like after that happened with the stalker and him killing himself, then I got oh, it did it again. There. Now I don't know if it's me moving or if it's all like the
I
audio
don't know.
equipment or what. Um So then, yeah, I ended up I was having an awful time at work. Um, I was working with somebody who really didn't like me, which is understandable because I was an addict and an alcoholic. They were abusive
Hmm.
in a way where if I was sober, that wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't, allow that kind of treatment to take place. But it was just abusive and mean, and it wore away at me. And I just became like a withered half of a person. And I got fired, and then I think the guy was in a relationship at that point. I think he was done with me already. And then when
Hmm.
I got fired, I proceeded to just break into 1,000 pieces, and I think he proceeded to look for a way out, which I could tell, because I'm not stupid. I was drunk, but I was not stupid. I could see what was happening, and it literally it drove me insane. That was like another year, kind of just torture, and my family threw me into like what was like my 15th rehab, like for 30 days, which was a nice break, but I got out and I didn't know how to do life. And I was done
Hmm.
living at that point. So I took 2 weeks to write goodbye letters to everyone I knew, absolving them of any guilt. Because I decided that this world didn't need me and that I was just making things awful. Like I really, and it's like when you're that depressed, it's really, you can really convince yourself that that your family's miserable because of you, that everybody's miserable because you're here. Um, because some people are like, that's selfish. How can you do that to other people? Like, I really thought that my mom and everybody would be much happier if they didn't have to think about me. Because I was just such a miserable, piece of shit. That's how I saw myself. And so I finished writing these letters. It took a while. And I knew people who, like, people who uh, had gone back out on heroin after 60 days, and they died. So I'm thinking, okay, it's been 11 years since I used. um, I'm it's pretty safe. I'm gonna die. So I went out and I got it. I brought it back home and I had the letters out and everything, and I didn't die. So I was like, well, since I'm here, and then I was like doing for 6 months. I continued to do that drug, and I don't know what happened. It's like I really did that drug to death. So like I'm doing it for 6 months, and I'm like, wait a second, I know better than this. I can't live like this. I can't do this. You cannot dance with this drug. So I got on methadone, and so many things were happening during this point. I was in and out of homelessness. Um, I got into a half relationship so that my cats would have a place to live, because that's really all I care about in the
That was
world.
the
My
priority.
cats. Yeah.
Yes.
It was. It 100% was. Where are they going to stay? Um, and I go back and forth from being on the streets. I ended up getting on Suboxone, but I still continued to smoke crack and drink. And it wasn't until um, it was actually 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years ago in April. I was like, you know what am I doing every day with the crack and the alcohol and the driving away and getting a humongous bottle of alcohol and driving with it in the car. So I got my second like liter of alcohol that day, drove myself to Oakland where I was going to meet my dealer. I went to, this part makes no sense to me. I was clearly in a blackout because I had a cell phone. Yeah, I parked in a bank parking lot and I used a payphone. None of this makes sense. I called 911 and I said, if you don't come help me, I'm going to die. And then I went and got back in the car, left the car running, my open bottle of booze, my feet up on the dashboard, and passed out. And then the medics came and they said, did you call for help? And I said, yeah. And they said, do you need help? And I said, yeah. And they were like, okay, can we get in the car? So how I didn't get a DUI, I have no idea. Maybe it was because I said I needed help. I don't know what it was.
Hmm.
Um, but so they took me to the hospital where I was put on fluids for 24 hours. Um, they had to use an ultrasound to find a vein to hook me up to fluids, and it was off. The whole thing was awful. And that's when they were like, yeah, you definitely have liver disease, and we're discharging you, because it was just an ER in Oakland. They're like, we're discharging you, but you need help. And I was like, you're right, I clearly do. So I had a free taxi cab voucher, no shoes. I'm just wearing detox socks from the hospital. They dropped me a bag off at the car. And I knew my boyfriend at the time, like, he was definitely going to kick me out, but I didn't know if he might murder me instead, because I had taken his car. Like, he couldn't go to work and somebody did that to me. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, I didn't want to go back. So I'm taking my time, really taking my time getting back to San Jose. And then, oops, getting on the freeway, there's a liquor store. I think I'll stop. So I did. Yeah. And then, like, the minute that's introduced to my system, I wanted more crack. And so I'm doing both things and driving home, but really, like, going, I'm gonna go to detox. I'm gonna do this. And then I got back to San Jose, and then the next day my mom was supposed to come get me. He was irate. He kicked me out, which is great. It's just what I needed, because if somebody's going to co-sign anything I do for long enough, I will abuse it. If I'm in my disease, not now.
Right.
Although, I mean, the urge is there now because I'm still me. It's why I work on my character defects, I mean, but yeah, back then I couldn't help myself. I had to be thrown out on the streets. And I ended up finding a doctor. My mom drove down to take me to him. While I was waiting, I drank about a gallon of vodka. My mindset, I'm like, well, I'm going to detox.
Might as well get it in while I can.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And then I met the doctor told me that I had cirrhosis and jaundice. It was funny because he's like, can't you look in the mirror and see that you're yellow? And I was like, no, because I have learned to brush my teeth and put makeup on even without looking at myself, because I'm so disgusted by the person in the mirror, like, I didn't know who that monster was. And he said, are you done? And I just started crying because I was sick of bullshitting. Like, I was so sick of lying and of chasing this stupid drink and the stupid drug. And I said, yeah. And he put his 32-year chip in my hand. And I was like, whoa, no way. That was a magical moment. And then I checked into Good Samaritan Hospital and I detoxed. And they were like, yeah, you have cirrhosis, which I was concerned about, but I was like, whatever. At that point, I really didn't care if I died, kind of, And they were like, but your liver will heal itself if you don't drink. In 2 years, your liver could go back to normal if you don't drink. But if you do drink, you will die. And I was like, okay. So then I called my mom when they released me. She's going to pick me up and take me to Sonoma. She took too long to get there, so I drank. And the reason I tell that story is because, like, without a program, I'm going to drink. It's just, there's no two ways around it. Like, I have 3.5 years right now. And I feel like if I didn't go to a meeting, say I quit going to meetings, like right now, I don't go to meetings for 3 months, I'll drink, because I have no interest in, like, being dry and miserable. Like, I don't know how to not drink without a program. Like, that's the only way I know how to do this and be happy, because you're supposed to be happy. If we weren't happy, I would be back out there drinking, like, I didn't sign up for misery. Miserable shit does happen. Things get sad, but yeah.
It's when you talk about, like, the letters, writing letters, and, get that feeling of we're so worthless and nobody cares about us, and this idea that our family and our friends don't, and you come to find out that the truth is that they just want us to love ourselves as much as they love us.
Right.
And at that point, I mean, you're incapable of that. It doesn't seem, it doesn't exist, in your brain. It doesn't exist at all. And finding a program, whatever that program is, for you. I mean, there's somebody said, like, even if you're not working a program, you have one anyway, whether it's conscious or unconscious. So you have to choose one that works for you. And I always thought that was really great. Like, oh, I've been working. The program I was working was, drinking every single day, and that wasn't working. Or, well, it always seems to work for a while until it doesn't, right? Until everything goes sour, until the pain is no longer, taken care of, and you're left with nothing but suffering, regardless of whether you're sober or you're high.
Right.
So
exactly.
I just that part about the letters is like, it's heavy.
Why is that? It's funny. Like, I tell that story at meetings, and I'm used to telling that story. And it's like, whatever, it's just part of my story. And then this was in like what I think is a depressing area of San Francisco, but I don't know. Maybe it's not depressing. Maybe it's just because that's what I did there. It's in like Glen Park, way outer Mission. At least we have engineers here at the radio
Yes.
station. That's true.
Okay. Well, cool.
Fuck, do you remember where we were?
I do.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's okay.
I have wet brain.
That's my job. We were discussing your podcast, and that
Yes.
inspired me to do this one because I felt comfortable enough to talk about addiction out loud. You said one of the things that you really appreciated in your podcast is that you would get listens from Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
where women aren't allowed to go to meetings. Is that correct?
I mean, in some places and in some cases, I know they aren't. So it means a lot to me that, and I think that there's people who are just too embarrassed, or there's too much shame for them to go to meetings, and they don't. Some people might just stick their toe in the water or might not really want to get in. And I just feel like the more I can expose them to, and, to what we talk about and what we think about, and the way it's normal, I know there's people who think, oh my God, I'm crazy. The way I think is insane. Because the way we think is insane, but we're also in a room of like 50 people who also think that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of recovery to me. And I just want to be able to share that with as many people as possible. And it's funny because you'll be at meetings and they'll be doing the traditions, and it'll say, like in regards to radio, television, and a couple of people have added the internet. It's like, I'm sorry, you don't get to go back to 1935 and add the internet when you don't know what Bill W. would have fucking thought of the internet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so they don't get to just add internet. It's like, but I totally get the anonymity thing, but you can't just, it's like when people, sometimes I'll be at like a kind of hippie, whatever meeting in San Francisco, and they're adding words to how it works. And I'm like, you can't do that. Just read what it says.
Yeah. It's such a dicey situation because I didn't realize how much I would enjoy talking about it with other, alcoholics and figuring it out and going, like you said, oh yeah, me too. I can't believe you think that crazy thought as well. I'm so relieved. And when I can only do it in a church basement or in the back of a parking lot or somewhere, it just feels, and I appreciate the anonymity, and I understand why people need it and why. And I feel like, and maybe I think you would agree that the stigma is being lifted more and more than it was in your dad's time, when it was Bill W.'s time, and so I certainly don't want to put anybody out there that doesn't want to be put out there. And I would never do that. I mean, still, when, you're at the grocery store and I'll be with my girlfriend and how do you know that person? Well, and she's like, oh, okay.
Right. So, I know that happens I'll be with my mom in Sonoma, and she's like, how do you know that person? I'm like, Mom, how do you think I'm friends with an 80-year-old man? Like, where do you think we connected? Oh, I think, the program. So she quit asking.
It's just, and that was a big relief to be able to talk about it and say, okay, well, I guess, because, my friend and I, we started it. We were just having our own personal meeting. He lives up in Oregon, and we'd get online and talk and read and talk. And then we're like, well, why can't we just record this? What is stopping us? Who am I hurting? Am I hurting someone? And it just felt like it would be more helpful. And so I appreciate what you do with it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the more of us that are talking about it, the better. It's like somebody said, "Oh, I was looking for your podcast, and I saw another podcast on recovery." And I was like, "Oh," she's like, "Does that upset you?" And I'm like, "Fuck no! Like, that's why I do it. Like, the more of us that are out there, the better." I went to this it was like a 10K run, and I did not do that part. I just did the after part, where everybody met in Chrissy Field in San Francisco, and there was this movement called Recover Out Loud. And I haven't like gone to their functions or anything since then, but I just like the name Recover Out Loud because it's like my relapse was pretty damn public. People saw me relapse, and it's like, I didn't get to keep that under wraps. So I feel like my recovery should be public too. I should be able to recover out loud, just as much as I relapsed out loud.
Sure.
And I think that's what is going to help other people get sober.
I absolutely agree. And I just wanted to, I think the last thing I wanted to ask you about is the cats because I'm a
Oh,
big
Peter
fan
gets
of
it.
cats on Instagram. And so I see yours every once in a while. What kind of cats are they and what are their names?
They're Abyssinians, and
Mm-hmm.
their names are P Dink and Zippy.
Okay.
And they're litter mates. They're brother and sister. And they just turned 12 in December, which makes them senior kitties, which makes me so sad because I know that, I got to like come to terms with everybody knows when something happens to these cats, I'm going to need to be hog-tied and
Yeah.
possibly institutionalized because I love them so much. But yeah, they're like my reason for living. I just love them so much. But I love everyone's cats and I love all animals. Like I spend my Facebook screen or not my Facebook, my phone screen. It tells you like how much screen time you spent last week. And it came up like, oh, you were down 17% last week. You only spent 3.5 hours of the day on your phone. And I'm like, oh my God, because I know what I'm doing is I'm just looking at pictures of cats. Like I'm just on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. There's this cat on Instagram named Hosako Cat. I follow everything his ass does. It's a little crazy. It's a
Yeah.
little crazy. I might be a cat addict.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's worse things. We all know that.
So much worse things. Yeah, so
So
much worse
enjoy
things.
the cat screen time.
I
And
will.
if anybody's looking for you, it's radio.rehab, right? And it's
Radio
radio
dot
rehab.
rehab and Radio Rehab with Dayna Keyes on iTunes
Cool.
under
Cool. Well,
podcasts. So yeah,
Dayna, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate you doing this and coming on and sharing. And I, it's nice to meet you.
it's nice to meet you too.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, will you come on Radio Rehab?
Of course.
Awesome.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.